Hello and welcome. Magic pulses through every corner of existence in ways most mortals never comprehend. You cast a spell, speak an incantation, weave your fingers through complex patterns, and reality bends to your will. But have you ever stopped to wonder where this power truly comes from? Before wizards studied dusty tomes in candlelit towers, before clerics called upon their deities for divine intervention, before warlocks struck their dangerous bargains, magic existed in a form so wild and untamed that it threatened to tear apart the very concept of reality itself. Tonight, you will journey back to the very beginning to understand the forces that would eventually become the structured, controlled energy you now channel through careful study and devoted practice. Long before the world of Faerun took shape, before the material plane knew the touch of mortal life, the multiverse churned in a state of absolute chaos. This was not chaos in the sense you might understand it today, with random events occurring without pattern or reason. This was something far more fundamental, far more terrifying. The elements themselves had not yet separated into their distinct forms. Fire did not simply burn, it simultaneously froze and drowned and solidified. Water flowed upward and downward at once, existing as liquid and vapor, and ice in the same impossible moment. The very concept of direction held no meaning, because space itself had not yet learned to behave according to any consistent rules. In this primordial state, magical energy existed as raw, undifferentiated potential. The fundamental forces that would one day power your spells permeated everything, but without structure or purpose. This could imply that magic predates even the gods themselves, existing as an intrinsic property of reality, rather than something created by divine will. The energy that would one day manifest as fire bolt spells or healing touch existed here, but it existed in pure chaos. Touching this raw magic directly would have been like trying to hold the sun in your bare hands, like attempting to contain an ocean within a single cup. The beings who first emerged from this chaos were not gods as you understand them now. They were primordials, entities of pure elemental fury who embodied the chaotic nature of early existence. These were creatures of such immense power and alien thought that even their names strain mortal comprehension. They did not think in words or organize their thoughts in logical sequences. They simply were, existing as living expressions of elemental force. Some took forms that resembled mountains given terrible life. Others moved like hurricanes given consciousness and malevolent intent. Still others existed as walking infernos or ambulatory tsunamis, their very presence warping reality around them. These primordials did not create magic, because magic had always existed, but they wielded it in ways that would later seem impossible to mortal spellcasters. They did not need incantations or gestures or components. They did not study or practice. Magic simply flowed through them as naturally as blood flows through your veins. as naturally as breath fills your lungs. When a primordial desired something, reality shifted to accommodate that desire. When they grew angry, entire regions of protospace erupted into elemental fury. They were magic incarnate, walking disasters who reshaped existence according to their incomprehensible whims. But the primordials were not alone in the void. As the multiverse slowly began to organize itself, as patterns started to emerge from the chaos, new beings came into existence. These were the gods, and they represented something fundamentally different from the primordials. Where the primordials embodied pure elemental chaos, the gods represented concepts and ideas. They were not simply forces of nature-given form. They were intelligence, consciousness, and purpose crystallized into divine beings. The gods looked at the chaos surrounding them and saw potential. They envisioned a cosmos where things happened for reasons, where cause reliably led to effect, where the elements could be distinguished from one another, and where life could flourish in stable environments. They imagined worlds where mortals might one day walk, where civilizations could rise and fall, where stories could unfold across countless generations. This vision, this desire for order and structure, brought them into immediate conflict with the primordials, who saw any attempt to impose order as an attack on their very nature. The war that followed would echo through eternity. Scholars in your time call it the Dawn War, though that name hardly captures the true scope of the conflict. This was not a war fought with armies marching across battlefields or navies clashing on turbulent seas. This was a war fought with reality itself as the weapon and the prize. Gods and primordials clashed in battles that rewrote the fundamental laws of existence. When they fought, entire planes of reality came into being or ceased to exist. The elements themselves learned their distinct natures through the violence of this conflict, forced into separate categories by the sheer power being unleashed. During this terrible war, magic began to change. The gods, unlike the primordials, did not simply let raw power flow through them without thought or purpose. They shaped it, directed it, gave it structure and meaning. They discovered that magic could be channeled, focused, made to serve specific purposes, rather than simply erupting in chaotic displays of force. This was perhaps the first true spellcasting, though it bore little resemblance to the careful incantations you might speak today. The gods learned to weave threads of magical energy together, to create effects that followed predictable patterns, to make reality respond to their will in consistent, repeatable ways. The primordials noticed this development and responded with rage. To them, the structuring of magic represented a violation of everything they were. Magic was meant to be wild, free, ungoverned by rules or limitations. By giving it structure, the gods were trying to tame something that should never be tamed, to cage something that was meant to roam free across the infinite expanses of the multiverse. The war intensified, with with the primordials unleashing ever greater displays of raw elemental fury, while the gods countered with increasingly sophisticated magical techniques. You might wonder who won this cosmic conflict. The answer is complex as the nature of magic itself. The gods achieved their goal of creating order from chaos. They successfully imposed structure on the multiverse, creating the planes of existence as you know them today. The material plane came into being, a realm where matter behaved according to reliable physical laws, where time flowed in a consistent direction, where living beings could exist without being torn apart by elemental chaos. The elemental planes formed as well. But now they were separate, distinct realms, rather than an undifferentiated mass of clashing forces. But the primordials were not destroyed. Many were imprisoned, bound in chains forged from divine power, and locked away in distant corners of the multiverse. Others were transformed, changed from beings of pure chaos into something more compatible with the newly ordered cosmos. A few managed to retreat to remote regions where the old chaos still held some sway, where reality had not yet fully accepted the gods' imposed order. And all of them left their mark on magic itself. The raw, chaotic power of the primordials did not simply vanish when the gods imposed order on the multiverse. Instead, it became woven into the very fabric of reality, the primal magic that druids and rangers tap into when they commune with nature carries echoes of this primordial legacy. It is magic that remembers its origins in elemental chaos. Magic that still carries a hint of wildness, even when channeled through mortal spellcasters. When a druid calls forth lightning from a clear sky, or causes vines to erupt from barren stone, they are touching something ancient, something that existed before the gods established their cosmic order. Among the first generation of gods emerged two sisters whose conflict would shape magic's destiny for all time to come. Selûne embodied light, creativity, and change, while her twin Shar represented darkness, loss, and stasis. Their relationship began as complementary forces, two halves of a cosmic whole. But as the universe developed and the gods began shaping the material plane, philosophical differences emerged between them. Selûne wanted to fill the newly created worlds with warmth and life. Shar preferred the cold emptiness of the void, seeing life and change as disruptions to the perfect stillness she valued. Their disagreement escalated into open conflict. Selûne reached into the plane of fire and used its pure flame to ignite the sun, bringing warmth and light to the world that would become known as Toril. Shar responded with fury, attempting to snuff out this light and return the universe to cold darkness. The two goddesses battled with power that shook the foundations of newly ordered reality. Weakened and desperate, Selûne made a choice that would forever change the nature of magic in the multiverse. Selûne tore the divine essence of magic from within herself and hurled it at her sister. This magical essence passed through Shar, ripping away her own magical nature in the process. The torn essences of both goddesses, light and dark intermingled, coalesced into a new divine being. This was Mistral, the first goddess of magic, born from both light and darkness, embodying balance between opposing forces. Mistral's birth represented more than simply the creation of another deity. Her very existence changed the fundamental nature of reality. The magical energy that had existed as raw chaos, that the primordials had wielded without structure, that even the gods had only partially organized, all of this suddenly gained a divine consciousness dedicated entirely to understanding and managing it. Mistral perceived magic in ways that no being before her had managed. She saw patterns and possibilities, structures and pathways that could make magical power accessible to beings far less powerful than gods. And so Mistral began her greatest work, the creation of the weave. This would be a structure overlaying reality itself, a framework through which magical energy could flow safely and predictably. The weave would not eliminate the danger of magic entirely. That would be impossible and perhaps undesirable. But it would provide guidelines, channels, safe pathways through which magical energy could flow from its source to the spellcaster and back out into the world. For the first time since the Dawn War ended, mortals would be able to touch magic without being destroyed by it. The creation of the weave took time beyond mortal reckoning. Mistral worked with infinite patience, establishing rules for how magical energy should behave when accessed by mortal spellcasters. She created what you might think of as magical laws, principles that would govern spellcasting across all of Faerun and beyond. These were not laws in the sense of written decrees, but fundamental truths woven into the fabric of reality itself. As Mistral completed her great work, mortals across the young world began to perceive something new in their reality. Those with sensitivity to magical forces noticed threads of energy flowing through everything, patterns that had not been visible before. The first mortal spellcasters, shamans, witch doctors, wise ones who had previously relied on crude and dangerous manipulation of raw magical energy, discovered that their craft had suddenly become safer and more reliable. Spells that had been lethal to attempt now became manageable with proper training. The world of Faerun, particularly, became a crucible for this new structured magic. The gods had poured tremendous energy into creating this world, making it a jewel among material planes. That divine attention left the fabric of reality there particularly rich with magical potential. Early civilizations across Faerun developed their own unique relationships with the weave, their own techniques and traditions that would echo down through the ages. In the frozen Northlands, shamans learned to channel the weave while speaking with spirits of ice and storm. In the deep jungles, witch doctors discovered that certain plants and animals carried magical essence that resonated with the weave's patterns. In the vast deserts, mystics meditated until they achieved states of consciousness where they could perceive the weave directly. Seeing the intricate patterns Mistral had woven into reality, each culture, each people, developed their own understanding of this new structured magic. But Mistral was wise enough to know that complete control would destroy what made magic wondrous and powerful. She deliberately left room for variation, for creativity, for the unexpected. The weave she created was not a rigid cage, but a flexible framework. This could suggest that Mistral recognized magic's dual nature. It needed structure to be safe, but too much structure would strip away the wonder and possibility that made magic meaningful in the first place. The goddess observed mortal spellcasters with particular fascination. She watched as humans in what would become the Netherese Empire pushed the boundaries of what magic could accomplish. She saw elven spellsingers in the great forests weave intricate patterns of power that lasted for centuries. She witnessed the first sorcerers, mortals born with magic flowing through their blood, learning to work with the weave in instinctive ways that differed from trained wizards. Each of these spellcasters touched magic in their own way, but all of them benefited from the structure Mistral had created. For thousands of years, this arrangement persisted. The weave functioned as intended, providing safe access to magical power for those with the talent and training to use it. Mistral maintained her creation with constant attention, adjusting and refining its patterns as needed. Magic became more structured, more systematic, more scientific in many ways. Schools of learning formed where masters taught apprentices the proper techniques for accessing the weave and shaping magical energy. Yet Mistral's work attracted attention she had not sought. Shar, the goddess of darkness from whose torn essence Mistral had partly been born, watched the weave carefully. She observed how it channeled magical energy, how it provided structure and order. And she began to formulate a plan to create an alternative, a rival structure that would give her influence over magic comparable to what Mistral wielded. This shadow of the weave would grow in secret, waiting for its moment to emerge and challenge the established order of magic. The age of raw, unstructured magic had ended with Mistral's creation of the weave. But the age that followed would prove that even structured magic carried dangers, that mortal ambition could threaten the very foundations of reality, that the goddess of magic herself was not immune to catastrophe. The world stood on the threshold of an era that would see empires rise to unmatched magical heights, only to fall in disasters that would reshape the face of Faerun forever. Section 2. The Weave's Creation and Mistra's Divine Touch. The goddess who would shape magic's destiny bore many names across the ages, but in her first true manifestation, mortals knew her as Mistral. She emerged from the torn divine essences of Selûne and Shar, a being who did not simply wield magical power, but embodied it completely. every thought she had rippled through the magical currents of the multiverse. Every breath she took resonated with arcane energy. She was not merely a goddess of magic. She was magic given divine consciousness and purpose. Mistral observed the mortal world with particular fascination. She watched as human wizards in the lands that would become Nethril pushed the boundaries of what magic could accomplish, their ambitions growing with each generation. She saw elven spellsingers in the great forests of Faerun weave intricate patterns of power that lasted for centuries. She witnessed the first sorcerers, mortals born with magic flowing through their blood, struggling to control gifts they had not asked for and did not fully understand. Each of these spellcasters touched the weave in their own way, drawing on the structure she had created to safely channel magical energy. The weave that Mistral maintained existed in layers, you should understand. At its most basic level, it provided structure for simple cantrips and minor spells, the magical equivalent of learning to walk before attempting to run. These were the spells you might cast dozens of times each day without exhausting yourself. Simple manipulations of magical energy that required minimal effort once you learned the proper techniques. A wizard lighting a candle with a thought, a sorcerer creating minor illusions, a warlock reading text in magical darkness. All of these drew upon the weave's most accessible layer. Deeper layers of the weave controlled more powerful magic. As spellcasters progressed in their studies and their understanding deepened, they learned to reach further into the weave, to access stronger currents of magical energy. These deeper layers required more effort to access, more concentration to maintain, and they drew more heavily on personal reserves of strength and will. The most powerful spells existed in the deepest layers of the weave, accessible only to the most skilled and experienced spellcasters. Mistral established boundaries within the weave, though these were more like guidance than absolute restrictions. She made accessing certain levels of power progressively more difficult as the power increased. A novice wizard simply could not perceive the deeper layers of the weave, no matter how hard they tried. Their consciousness lacked the necessary development. Their understanding remained too shallow. As spellcasters grew in knowledge and experience, these deeper layers gradually became visible to their magical senses, like mist clearing to reveal distant mountains. But Mistral's work attracted attention beyond the mortal realm. Shar, the goddess of darkness from whose torn essence Mistral had partly been born, studied the weave carefully. She observed how it channeled magical energy, how it provided structure and order. And she began to formulate a plan to create an alternative, a rival structure that would give her influence over magic comparable to what Mistral wielded. Shar worked in secret, using her dominion over darkness and secrets to hide her efforts from other deities. She created what would become known as the Shadow Weave, a parallel structure that existed alongside Mistral's creation, but drew power from different sources, where the weave channeled magical energy from positive forces of creation. The shadow weave tapped into negative energies, into darkness and entropy, and the spaces between existence. Spells cast through the shadow weave often had different effects than their weave-based equivalents, sometimes stronger in certain applications, sometimes carrying unexpected consequences. The shadow weave remained largely unknown for centuries after its creation. Shar revealed its existence only to her most devoted followers, spellcasters who proved their loyalty through service to darkness. These shadow weavers, as they came to be called, learned to perceive both the weave and the shadow weave, to choose which structure they drew upon for their magic. This gave them certain advantages, particularly when dealing with magic related to darkness, shadows, or negative energy, but it also marked them as servants of Shar. For touching the shadow weave left subtle traces that certain divination spells could detect. Mistral became aware of the shadow weave eventually, though the exact circumstances of this discovery remain debated among scholars. Based on what we know of divine awareness, we can assume she perceived disturbances in magical flows that led her to investigate. Her response was measured rather than aggressive. She strengthened the weave to prevent the shadow weave from undermining it, but she did not attempt to eliminate Shar's alternative structure entirely. This could imply that direct conflict with Shar over the shadow weave might have risked damaging both structures, potentially causing catastrophic consequences for all magic users. For thousands of years, this arrangement persisted. The weave provided the primary framework for magic across Faerun, while the shadow weave served as an alternative path for those who sought it, or were led to it by Shar's influence. Most spellcasters remained completely unaware that the shadow weave existed. They cast their spells through the weave without ever realizing they were using a divine structure, rather than accessing raw magical energy directly. But the stability of this arrangement would eventually be shattered by mortal ambition. In the ancient empire of Netheril, human wizards had pushed magical knowledge to heights unmatched before or since. They created floating cities called enclaves that soared through the skies, powered by magical engines of incredible sophistication. They extended their lifespans far beyond natural limits, some achieving functional immortality through magical means. They explored other planes of existence, established diplomatic relations with beings of immense power, and accumulated magical knowledge that filled vast libraries. Among these Netherese wizards walked a man named Karsus. He was born in the year -696 Dale Reckoning, and from his earliest youth, he displayed magical talent that astonished even the most accomplished wizards of his time. By age 10, he had mastered spells that adult wizards spent lifetimes attempting to understand. By his 20s, Karsus had become the youngest arcanist, the Netherese term for their most powerful wizards in the Empire's history. He created spells that bore his name, effects that would be studied and replicated for millennia after his death. He walked among the elite of Nethril as a peer despite his relative youth, respected and feared in equal measure. But Karsus was not satisfied with mastery of existing magic. He wanted to push beyond the boundaries that existed within the weave to access power at the very deepest levels. He studied the weave obsessively, learning to perceive its structure in ways that perhaps no other mortal before or since has matched. And in his studies, driven by a desire to save his empire from threats it faced, he conceived of a spell of unprecedented ambition. The Netherese Empire faced a dire threat from creatures called Farim, powerful beings who were draining magic from the land and causing widespread devastation. Conventional magic had proven insufficient to stop them. Karsus believed that to defeat such a threat, he needed power beyond what any mortal possessed. He needed divine power. And so, he developed a spell that would forever bear his name as Karsus's avatar, designed to steal the power of a deity and transfer it to the caster. The spell required components of impossible rarity and complexity. The casting would take hours of uninterrupted concentration. The magical energies involved would dwarf anything Karsus had attempted before, but he believed it would work. And in his confidence, he failed to fully consider the consequences of success. Karsus chose Mistral as his target, believing that by stealing her divine power, he would gain control over the weave itself. With that control, he reasoned, he could solve the problems that threatened Netheril. In the year -339 Dale Reckoning, Karsus cast his spell. The magical power he channeled was so immense that reality itself buckled under the strain. For a single, horrifying moment, the spell worked. Karsus's consciousness expanded to encompass the weave, and he perceived magic across all of Faerun simultaneously. He felt every spell being cast, sensed every magical item, knew the location of every source of arcane power. He had become, in that instant, a god of magic. But Karsus discovered immediately that godhood was not what he had imagined. The responsibility of maintaining the weave was not simply a matter of possessing divine power. It required constant attention, infinite awareness, and a level of understanding that Karsus, for all his genius, did not possess. He tried to control the weave as Mistral had, but he could not comprehend the intricate patterns she had woven over millennia. Magic began to fail across Faerun, not because Karsus willed it, but because he could not maintain the structure he had stolen. Mistral, her divine essence torn away by Karsus's spell, retained just enough awareness to understand what was happening. The weave was collapsing. Magic was failing. And if she did not act immediately, the consequences would be catastrophic beyond imagination. With the last fragments of her power, Mistral did the only thing she could. She sacrificed herself, allowing her divine essence to dissolve completely, which broke Karsus's connection to her stolen power and caused his spell to unravel. For a handful of heartbeats, magic ceased to exist across Faerun. Every spell being cast at that moment failed. Every magical item went dormant. The floating cities of Netheril, held aloft by constant magical force, began to fall. Karsus returned to mortality in an instant, watched his city plummet toward the ground below. He tried desperately to cast spells that might save his people, but magic no longer responded to his commands. In his final moments, as his city fell and the ground rushed up to meet him, Karsus understood the magnitude of his mistake. The grief and horror of what he had done transformed him to stone even before the impact, preserving his final expression of anguish for eternity. The devastation was absolute. Thousands died in the fall of the Netherese enclaves. The greatest magical civilization in Faerun's history was destroyed in moments. The Empire's accumulated knowledge, its libraries and artifacts and wonders, were buried under rubble or scattered across the landscape. Survivors emerged from the wreckage traumatized and broken, their entire world literally shattered around them. This moment became known as Karsus's folly, a warning to all future spellcasters about the dangers of overreaching ambition. But even as Netheril fell, magic began to return to Faerun. A new goddess emerged from the divine essence that Mistral had released in her sacrifice. This new deity took the name Mistra, and while she carried forward Mistral's role as goddess of magic, she was also fundamentally different. Mistra had witnessed the consequences of Karsus's folly through Mistral's final moments. She emerged from the catastrophe with painful understanding of how mortals might abuse magical power. Mistra immediately set about reconstructing the weave, but she made significant changes to its design. Where Mistral had been permissive, allowing mortals to push boundaries and explore magic's limits, Mistra was more restrictive. She established firm barriers within the weave, limitations that could not be overcome through skill or knowledge alone. The most significant of these was a ban on spells above 9th level of power, magic capable of granting true godhood, of directly stealing divine power, of permanently altering fundamental laws of nature. All of this was placed beyond mortal reach. The weave itself would no longer allow such spells to function, regardless of the caster's skill or determination. These restrictions angered some of Netheril's surviving wizards, who saw them as divine tyranny imposed on mortal magic users. They argued that one man's folly should not condemn all spellcasters to limited power, but Mistra was unmoved by their protests. She had inherited Mistral's memories of the weave's collapse, and she would not allow such a catastrophe to occur again if she could prevent it. The weave would serve mortals, but it would also protect them from their own most dangerous impulses. Mistra also changed how she interacted with mortal spellcasters. Where Mistral had maintained a distant approach, Mistra took a more active role in guiding magic's development. She began choosing mortal champions, spellcasters who would serve as her representatives and help maintain the weave's integrity. These chosen of Mistra gained abilities beyond normal mortal limits, serving as both examples of what dedicated study could achieve and as guardians against those who might threaten magical stability. The shadow weave remained after Karsus's folly, largely unchanged by the catastrophe that destroyed Mistral and transformed her into Mistra. This confirmed what some scholars had suspected, that Shar's creation was truly independent of the normal weave, drawing on different sources of power. Shar herself took some satisfaction in this, seeing it as proof that her approach to magic was more stable than Mistra's. The goddess of darkness began more actively recruiting spellcasters to use the shadow weave, promising them power without the limitations that Mistra had imposed. But using the shadow weave came with its own costs that Shar did not always make clear to her followers. Magic drawn through the shadow weave often had subtle corrupting effects, slowly changing the caster's personality and outlook to align more closely with Shar's principles. Shadow weavers found themselves drawn to darkness and secrecy, uncomfortable in bright light, suspicious of others' motives. Over time, even well-intentioned spellcasters who used the shadow weave regularly might find themselves serving Shar's agenda, whether they consciously chose to or not. For over 2,000 years after Karsus's folly, this arrangement persisted. Mistra maintained the weave with its new restrictions in place. The shadow weave continued to exist as an alternative path, used primarily by Shar's followers and by those few independent-minded spellcasters who discovered its existence. Magic became more structured, more systematic, more codified. Schools of wizardry formed, developing standardized curricula and teaching methods. Magical traditions became recorded in books rather than passed down solely through oral teaching. The age of wild experimentation that characterized early Netheril gave way to more conservative, careful approaches to spellcasting. Yet beneath this appearance of stability, tensions brewed. Mistra's restrictions chafed at ambitious wizards who believed they had earned the right to push beyond imposed limits. Some sought ways around the barriers she had established, exploring alternative magical systems or attempting to access the shadow weave. Conflicts arose between users of the weave and shadow weavers, with each group viewing the other with suspicion and hostility. And in the wider cosmos, divine politics grew increasingly complex, with various gods forming alliances and rivalries that would eventually drag magic itself into catastrophic conflict. The stability that mortals took for granted after Karsus's folly was built on foundations more fragile than most realized. Mistra maintained the weave through constant divine attention, and her existence as a goddess depended on worship and belief from mortals. Should anything happen to disrupt either of these elements, should Mistra die again, or should the flow of worship falter, the consequences for magic, and for all who depended on it, would be severe. History would prove that such disruptions were not merely theoretical concerns, but genuine threats that would manifest with terrible regularity in the ages to come. Section 3. The many sources of magical power. You stand at a crossroads of power, surrounded by possibilities that mortals in earlier ages could never have imagined. Magic flows from many sources now, each distinct in its nature and requirements, each demanding different things from those who would wield it. Understanding these sources means understanding not just how to cast spells, but why magic works at all. What fundamental forces you are touching when you speak an incantation, or channel divine favor, or make a bargain with entities beyond mortal comprehension. Divine magic represents perhaps the oldest structured form of power available to mortals. When you call upon your deity for aid, when you channel divine energy to heal wounds or smite enemies, you are not drawing power from yourself or from some abstract magical field. You are receiving a direct gift from a god, a fragment of divine essence temporarily placed at your disposal. This is magic granted rather than magic taken, power that flows through faith and devotion rather than through study or innate talent. The gods themselves draw their power from multiple sources, though mortal minds struggle to comprehend the full complexity of divine existence. Belief fuels divinity in ways that seem almost paradoxical. When mortals worship a deity, pray to them, build temples in their honor, perform rituals in their name, this devotion generates actual power that sustains and strengthens the god. A deity with millions of faithful followers commands vastly more power than one worshipped by only a handful of believers. In this sense, gods and mortals exist in a relationship of mutual dependence. The gods need worship to maintain their divine status, while mortals need the gods' power to accomplish feats beyond their natural abilities. But divine power is not simply accumulated worship transformed into magical energy. Each god embodies certain concepts, certain aspects of existence, and they draw strength from those concepts being manifested in the world. A god of war grows stronger when conflicts erupt across the mortal realm. A goddess of love gains power from every romantic connection, every act of compassion and caring. A deity of death becomes more potent each time a living being passes from life, regardless of whether that being worshipped them. This connection to fundamental concepts makes gods more than just powerful beings. They are living manifestations of universal principles. When you pray for divine intervention, your prayer travels through metaphysical channels that connect mortal realm to divine domain. Your deity perceives your need, your faith, your worthiness to receive aid. In a fraction of a heartbeat, the god makes a decision about whether to grant your request. If they choose to help you, divine energy flows down through those same channels, entering your body and soul, empowering you to cast the spell you need. This process happens so quickly that you experience it as instantaneous. But theologians argue that entire exchanges might occur between deity and worshipper in the timeless space where mortal perception cannot follow. The nature of this granted power varies depending on the deity involved. A spell to heal injuries granted by a god of life and light might manifest as warm golden radiance that knits flesh and soothes pain. The same healing spell granted by a god of death and rebirth might appear as cold silver light that reverses the process of dying, pulling the injured person back from the threshold of the afterlife. Both achieve the same result, restoration of health, but they approach that goal from different philosophical and metaphysical directions. Divine magic comes with implicit expectations that arcane magic does not. Your God grants you power because you serve their interests, advance their agenda, exemplify their values. If you betray those principles, if you use divine power in ways that contradict your deity's nature, you risk losing access to that power entirely. A cleric who commits acts of cruelty in service to a god of mercy might find their prayers going unanswered. A paladin who breaks their sacred oaths discovers that divine strength no longer flows through them, leaving them as vulnerable as any common warrior. Contrast this with arcane magic, which demands no such surrender. When you master arcane spells through study and practice, you are learning to manipulate the weave directly through your own knowledge and will. No god stands between you and magical power. No divine judgment determines whether your spell succeeds or fails. Your success depends entirely on your own skill, your understanding of magical principles, your ability to focus your mind and execute precise gestures and incantations. Arcane magic flows through the weave that Mistra maintains, but the goddess does not personally evaluate each spell cast by every wizard across Faerun. The weave functions more like a tool or a resource than like a conscious intermediary. You reach into it, draw power from it, shape that power according to your will, and release it into the world to produce the effect you desire. The weave provides structure and safety, making this process possible without destroying you. But it does not judge your worthiness or your intentions. This independence gives arcane spellcasters tremendous freedom. You can use your magic for any purpose you choose: good, evil, or utterly neutral. The weave does not care whether you cast a fireball to destroy a demon threatening innocence, or to murder those same innocents yourself. Moral and ethical considerations are entirely up to you and the society in which you live. This freedom comes with responsibility, of course, but it is responsibility you bear personally rather than having it imposed by divine will. Learning arcane magic requires a different kind of dedication than divine spellcasting. Where clerics and paladins grow in power through faith and service. Wizards advance through study and practice. You spend years learning to perceive the weave, to sense its currents and flows. You study the writings of previous wizards, learning from their discoveries and their mistakes. You practice fundamental techniques thousands of times until they become second nature. The precise finger movements for a fire spell, the exact pronunciation of words in ancient magical languages, the mental discipline required to hold complex patterns in your mind while simultaneously channeling magical energy. The wizard's spellbook becomes a repository of accumulated knowledge, each spell recorded in personal notation that other wizards might struggle to decipher. You do not memorize spells in the sense of remembering words and actions. Rather, you imprint patterns onto your consciousness, prepare your mind to channel magical energy in specific configurations. When you cast a spell, you are essentially executing a complex magical formula from your prepared memory, channeling it through the weave and expending the mental pattern in the process. This is why wizards must rest and study their spellbooks again to prepare more spells. They need time to rebuild those mental patterns. Sorcerers experience arcane magic very differently from wizards, though both ultimately draw power through the weave. Where wizards learn magic through external study, sorcerers possess innate magical ability. Magic flows through your bloodline or was infused into your being by some transformative event. You do not need to study spellbooks because the knowledge of how to shape magical energy exists within you at an instinctual level. You cast spells the way others breathe, naturally, without conscious thought about the underlying mechanisms. This innate connection to magic makes sorcery both easier and more limited than wizardry. You can cast spells more flexibly than wizards, adapting them spontaneously to meet changing circumstances. You can draw upon your magical reserves more efficiently, casting more spells before exhausting yourself. But you know fewer spells overall, limited by the specific magical heritage that flows through your veins. A sorcerer descended from dragons might excel at spells involving elemental energy, but struggle with subtle enchantments. One touched by wild magic can produce unpredictable effects beyond normal spellcasting, but at the cost of never quite knowing what might happen when they channel power. Warlocks represent yet another approach to arcane power, one that exists in a gray area between divine and arcane magic. You have made a pact with a powerful entity, perhaps a demon lord dwelling in the abyss, an archfey ruling over a domain in the Feywild, a great old one whose mind spans dimensions beyond mortal comprehension, or even a celestial being seeking to further the cause of good through mortal agents. This entity grants you magical power in exchange for service. But unlike divine magic granted by gods, pact magic comes with terms negotiated between you and your patron. The relationship between warlock and patron varies tremendously depending on the entities involved. Some patrons are demanding masters who expect constant obedience and service. Others are distant and uncaring, having made the pact for their own inscrutable reasons and rarely intervening in their warlock's affairs. A few patrons develop genuine mentoring relationships with their warlocks, guiding them toward greater power, while also protecting them from the pact's darker consequences. But in all cases, the power flows from patron to warlock through channels outside the normal divine hierarchy. Your patron teaches you to access magical energy in ways that conventional spellcasters might consider unorthodox or dangerous. You learn invocations, modifications to your spells that enhance or alter their effects. You gain abilities that blur the line between magic and supernatural power, traits that seem to transform you into something more than merely mortal. Over time, extended contact with your patron's essence begins to change you. A warlock bound to a fiend might develop inhuman charisma and a talent for deception. One serving a great old one often gains insights into reality that border on madness. Primal magic represents a return to power that existed before the weave, before divine structure was imposed on magical chaos. When druids and rangers channel primal forces, they are touching the legacy of the primordials, the elemental power that suffused the universe before gods brought order to creation. This magic flows from nature itself, from the growth of forests, the erosion of mountains, the migrations of animals, the change of seasons, the fury of storms. It is magic that remembers its origins in chaos, magic that retains a wildness even when channeled through mortal spellcasters. You do not command primal magic the way a wizard commands arcane spells. You request it, commune with it, open yourself to its flow. When you call lightning from a clear sky, you are not creating that lightning through force of will. You are asking the storm that is always potentially present to manifest here and now. When you cause plants to grow or animals to come to your aid, you are working with natural forces rather than imposing your desires upon them. This cooperative relationship requires humility and respect for nature's power. Druids possess the remarkable ability to change their physical form, transforming into animals through magic that seems to operate on principles entirely different from the transmutation spells wizards study. When you assume animal form, you are not simply reshaping your flesh. You are temporarily becoming that animal, adopting its instincts and perceptions along with its physical body. This transformation goes beyond what arcane magic typically allows, suggesting that primal magic can affect identity and consciousness in ways that the structured weave cannot easily replicate. The relationship between primal magic and the weave remains complex and somewhat contentious among magical scholars. Some argue that primal magic still flows through the weave, but through older, less structured pathways that predate Mystra's organization. Others insist that primal magic bypasses the weave entirely, drawing directly from elemental forces the way primordials once did. Evidence exists for both positions, and it is possible that both are partially correct, that some primal magic uses the weave, while other primal effects access power from outside that structure. Beyond these commonly recognized forms of magic exists psionic power, mental force, that operates through entirely different principles than spellcasting. Psionics represents the ability to reshape reality through pure thought, without gestures or incantations or divine intervention. When you manifest a psionic power, you are directly imposing your will upon the world, using consciousness itself as a tool to alter matter and energy. This makes psionics both more personal and potentially more dangerous than traditional magic. The relationship between psionics and the weave presents an ongoing debate among scholars. Some insist that psionic powers are simply another form of magic, another way of manipulating the same underlying forces that power arcane and divine spells. They point to evidence that anti-magic fields sometimes suppress psionic powers. Others argue that psionics is fundamentally distinct from magic, operating through principles of consciousness and mental energy that have nothing to do with the weave or divine power. The debate continues without resolution, suggesting that the boundaries between different forms of power may be less clear than practitioners prefer to believe. What becomes clear through studying these various sources is that magic represents possibility itself, the ability to change what is into what you will it to be. Whether you access that possibility through divine favor, arcane study, innate talent, otherworldly pacts, communion with nature, or the power of your own mind, you are fundamentally engaging with the same principle that reality is not fixed and immutable, but fluid and responsive to conscious intention. This is the true meaning of magic, the reason it has captivated mortal imagination since the first spellcasters reached out to touch forces beyond themselves. Each path to power shapes you differently. Divine spellcasters develop deep faith and become more aligned with their deity's values. Wizards cultivate scholarly discipline and analytical thinking. Sorcerers learn to trust their instincts and embrace their magical nature. Warlocks navigate complex relationships with powerful patrons. Druids achieve harmony with natural forces. Seons develop extraordinary mental focus and self-awareness. None of these paths is inherently superior to the others. Each offers unique strengths and presents unique challenges. The path you choose, or that chooses you, becomes part of your identity, shaping how you view yourself and how others perceive you. Section 4. Understanding magic's philosophy and practice. Understanding how to cast a spell represents only the beginning of magical mastery. The deeper mystery lies in comprehending what happens in those moments when you reach into the weave, when you draw power from your patron or your deity or your own inner reserves. You become something more than merely mortal in those instants, a conduit through which cosmic forces flow into the material world. This transformation, however brief, carries profound implications for who you are and who you might become. When you first learned to perceive the weave, the experience likely overwhelmed your senses. Most apprentice wizards describe it as suddenly becoming aware of a vast, shimmering network of connections that pervades everything around them. The air itself seems to glow with subtle threads of energy. Objects pulse with magical potential. Even empty space contains pathways and currents that your mundane senses never detected. This new perception does not replace your normal vision, but overlays it, adding a layer of magical awareness to your understanding of reality. The weave appears differently to different spellcasters, filtered through individual perception and magical tradition. A wizard trained in the classical academies might perceive it as geometric patterns of light, precise and orderly, reflecting the structured approach to magic they were taught. A sorcerer with wild magic in their blood might see it as constantly shifting colors and shapes, chaotic and unpredictable, mirroring their own unstable relationship with magical power. A warlock bound to a great old one might perceive disturbing wrongness in the weave's patterns, glimpsing the alien geometries that their patron understands. But mortal minds were never meant to comprehend. Your perception of the weave deepens as your magical knowledge grows. Beginning spellcasters can only perceive the surface layer, the most accessible currents of magical energy. These suffice for simple spells, cantrips, and basic effects that any trained individual might master. But as you advance in your studies, or grow in divine favor, or strengthen your pact, deeper layers of the weave gradually become visible to your magical senses. You begin to perceive stronger currents, more complex patterns, pathways to power that you could not even see when you first awakened to magic. Touching the weave to cast a spell creates a connection between your consciousness and the underlying fabric of reality. In that moment of contact, you are intimately linked to the same forces that hold the cosmos together, that define the boundaries between planes of existence, that determine how matter and energy interact. This connection is both exhilarating and terrifying. You feel the vast power available to you, the potential to reshape the world according to your will. But you also feel how fragile you are compared to these cosmic forces, how easily they could destroy you if you lost control. The actual process of spellcasting involves multiple simultaneous actions that become automatic through practice. Your hands move through precise gestures, each finger position carefully calibrated to channel magical energy in specific ways. Your voice speaks words of power, syllables in ancient languages where meaning and sound intertwine inseparably. Your mind holds the pattern of the spell you wish to cast, a complex mental construct that determines how magical energy will behave once released. And throughout all of this, you maintain your connection to the weave, drawing power through it and shaping that power according to your intention. component materials serve multiple purposes in this process. Some components act as focal points, helping you concentrate magical energy more effectively. A crystal or a specially prepared wand can channel power more precisely than your bare hands alone. Other components are consumed by the spell, their physical substance transformed into magical energy that fuels the effect you desire. This suggests that certain materials have inherent connections to specific types of magical effects, resonating with particular patterns within the weave. The schools of magic represent different ways of shaping and directing magical energy, different types of effects that spells can produce. Abjuration magic creates barriers and protections, using the weave to block or redirect harmful forces. When you cast an abjuration spell, you are essentially weaving magical energy into a shield or barrier, creating structure that can resist physical force or magical effects. The most powerful abjurations can make you completely immune to certain types of damage, or can prevent specific magical effects from touching you at all. Conjuration magic brings things into existence or transports them from one location to another. These spells work by creating temporary pathways through the weave that connect different points in space, or even different planes of existence. When you conjure a creature, you are not truly creating it from nothing. You are opening a doorway to wherever that creature already exists and bringing it through to your location. When you teleport, you are folding space through magical manipulation, making distant locations temporarily adjacent so you can step from one to the other. Divination magic reveals information that would otherwise remain hidden. These spells attune your senses to subtle flows in the weave, allowing you to detect magical auras, or peer into the future, or locate specific objects or individuals. Divination represents perhaps the most subtle school of magic, requiring sensitivity and intuition rather than raw power. The greatest diviners can perceive events happening thousands of miles away, or can glimpse potential futures branching from present decisions. Enchantment magic affects minds directly, influencing thoughts and emotions and behavior. When you cast an enchantment, you are using magical energy to stimulate or suppress specific patterns in the target's consciousness. A charm spell creates artificial feelings of friendship or trust. A command compels the target to follow your instructions. Sleep forces consciousness into dormancy. These effects bypass the target's normal mental processes, imposing external control through magical force. Evocation magic manipulates energy in its purest forms. Fire, lightning, force, radiant light, necrotic darkness. Evocation spells call these energies into being and direct them toward targets of your choosing. This is the most straightforward and often the most destructive school of magic. When you cast a fireball or a lightning bolt, you are channeling raw elemental power through the weave and releasing it into the physical world. Evocation requires careful control, because the energies involved are inherently dangerous and difficult to contain. Illusion magic creates false sensory impressions, making targets perceive things that are not really there or fail to perceive things that are. These spells manipulate how information flows from the world to the mind, inserting false data or blocking true perception. A simple illusion might create a visual image without substance. More sophisticated illusions can affect multiple senses simultaneously, creating phantom sounds and smells, and even tactile sensations. The most powerful illusions become partially real, gaining substance and the ability to cause actual harm. Necromancy magic manipulates life energy and the boundary between life and death. These spells can heal by channeling positive energy or harm by draining life force. They can animate the dead, creating undead servants from corpses. They can communicate with spirits of the deceased or temporarily restore the dead to life. Necromancy operates in areas where the weave connects to forces of life and death, making it both powerful and ethically complex. Transmutation magic alters the fundamental properties of matter and energy. These spells can make objects larger or smaller, can change one substance into another, can grant living beings new capabilities, or remove existing ones. Transmutation represents magic's ability to rewrite the rules that normally govern physical reality. When you transform yourself into an animal, or turn stone into flesh, or cause water to freeze without lowering its temperature, you are imposing your will directly onto matter itself. Each school of magic requires different mental approaches and different types of understanding. Most wizards eventually specialize in one or two schools, developing particular expertise in certain types of magic, while maintaining basic competence in others. This specialization reflects both personal preference and inherent aptitude. Your choice of specialization shapes your magical identity, defining you as a particular type of spellcaster with specific strengths and weaknesses. But mastering spells and understanding schools of magic does not make you invulnerable or all-powerful. Magic carries costs and risks that persist regardless of your skill level. The most obvious cost is the expenditure of your own energy and concentration. Each spell you cast draws on your personal reserves, depleting resources that only rest and recovery can fully restore. Cast too many spells without resting, and you will find yourself magically exhausted, unable to access the weave effectively until you have had time to recuperate. The weave itself does not exist uniformly across all of Faerun. Certain locations contain what scholars call wild magic zones, areas where the weave becomes unstable and unpredictable. In these regions, spells might produce effects completely different from what you intended. A simple light spell might explode in a burst of rainbow colors. A fireball could freeze its target instead of burning them. You might age or shrink or suddenly sprout feathers, Wild magic zones usually form in places where reality has been damaged, where the fabric of existence was torn and imperfectly repaired. Even more dangerous are dead magic zones, areas where the weave has been completely destroyed or severed. In these regions, magic simply does not function. Spells fail before they can complete. Magical items become inert. Divine spellcasters find their prayers going unanswered. Because the pathways that normally channel divine power have ceased to exist. Standing in a dead magic zone feels profoundly wrong to anyone with magical sensitivity. The absence of the weave creates a void in perception, a numbing emptiness where magical awareness should exist. These zones typically form as consequences of catastrophic magical events. The fall of a floating city might create a dead magic zone where it crashed. A failed ritual that attempted to summon an entity too powerful for reality to contain might tear the weave beyond repair. Battles between extremely powerful spellcasters sometimes leave scars in the magical fabric that take centuries to heal, if they heal at all. The shadow weave continues to exist as an alternative to mistress structure, offering spellcasters who know of its existence a different pathway to power. Magic channeled through the shadow weave often proves more potent in specific applications, particularly those involving darkness, negative energy, or necromancy. But it also carries the corrupting influence of Shar, slowly changing those who use it to align with the goddess of darkness. Your relationship with magic, regardless of which source you draw from or which school you specialize in, fundamentally changes your place in the world. Non-magical people view you with mixture of awe and fear, recognizing that you possess abilities they can never hope to match. Some societies revere spellcasters as living treasures, sources of power that protect and enrich the community. Other cultures fear magic as dangerous and corrupting, treating spellcasters as necessary evils to be controlled or threats to be eliminated. The ethical responsibilities of wielding magic weigh heavily on thoughtful spellcasters. You possess the power to kill with a gesture, to dominate minds, to steal, to spy, to violate every social norm and legal restriction. Only your personal ethics and the threat of consequences prevent you from using magic however you wish. This tremendous freedom demands equally tremendous responsibility. The most destructive spellcasters in history were not necessarily those with the greatest power, but those who had power without wisdom, who wielded magic without considering the consequences of their actions. Magic also shapes your perception of mortality and your own eventual death. Spells exist that can extend life far beyond natural limits. Wizards have achieved functional immortality through becoming liches, though at the cost of becoming undead abominations. Other forms of magical preservation allow consciousness to persist after physical death, bound into constructs, preserved in magical stasis, transformed into different types of beings altogether. These possibilities mean that death becomes negotiable for powerful spellcasters. Merely one transition among many, rather than an absolute ending. But pursuing immortality through magic carries profound risks and costs. The process of becoming a lich requires committing evil acts that corrupt the soul. Other forms of magical preservation often involve sacrificing essential aspects of your humanity. You might preserve your consciousness, but lose the ability to feel emotions or form new memories. You might extend your lifespan, but become increasingly alien and disconnected from mortal concerns. Section 5. The Living Weave and Magic's Evolution. The stability of magic that mortals took for granted would be tested in ways that shook the foundations of reality itself. In the year 1358 Dale Reckoning, a crisis erupted that would forever change how gods and mortals understood divine power and its relationship to the mortal world. This period became known as the Time of Troubles, and it began when Io, the overgod who stands above all other deities, made a decision that would have catastrophic consequences for Faerun. Io had observed growing arrogance among the gods, divine beings who had begun to take their worshippers for granted and neglect their responsibilities to the mortal realm. In response, he cast the gods down from their divine realms, forcing them to walk Faerun in physical forms called avatars. These divine avatars possessed tremendous power compared to mortals, but they were also vulnerable in ways that gods normally never experience. They could be injured, even killed, and if an avatar died, the deity it represented would perish as well. The immediate effect on magic was profound and destabilizing. Divine spellcasters found their connection to their deities disrupted. Prayers that should have granted healing or protection went unanswered or produced unpredictable effects. Some clerics received power from their gods with no problems, while others discovered their divine connection had been completely severed. The inconsistency created chaos among religious communities, with priests unable to explain why their magic functioned one day but failed the next. Mistra walked Faerun during this time in the form of a mortal woman named Midnight. This avatar carried within it the goddess's divine essence, but it experienced the world through mortal senses and mortal limitations. Midnight struggled to maintain the weave while trapped in physical form. Her attention divided between managing the vast structure of magic and simply surviving the dangers that surrounded her avatar. The weave began to show strain, developing inconsistencies and weak points that manifested as spontaneous magical surges across the continent. During the Time of Troubles, multiple gods competed for power and position in the divine hierarchy. The conflict came to involve Mistra's avatar directly, as other deities sought to claim her power over magic for themselves. In the battles that followed, Midnight's mortal form was destroyed, but the goddess's divine essence released when her avatar died, sought a new vessel. It found one in the mortal consciousness that Midnight had possessed before fully merging with Mistra's power, transforming that mortal into a new incarnation of the goddess of magic. This version of Mistra was different from the deity who had existed before, carrying memories and perspectives from her time as a mortal that influenced how she approached her divine responsibilities. The newly reborn Mistra immediately set about repairing damage to the weave caused during the time of troubles. She found weak points and tears in the structure, places where wild magic had erupted, or where the fabric of magical reality had been stretched too thin. Some of these damages she could repair completely. Others required compromises, patches that restored functionality but left subtle scars in the weave structure. The time of troubles also revealed uncomfortable truths about the relationship between gods and mortals. Divine power, while immense, was not absolute. Gods could be killed if their avatars were destroyed while they walked the mortal world. The worship and belief of mortals mattered far more than most deities had acknowledged, because that belief literally sustained divine existence. Some gods emerged from the time of troubles with renewed respect for their followers and commitment to their divine duties. For over 2 decades after the time of troubles, the weave functioned normally, and spellcasters across Faerun practiced their magic with the reassurance that cosmic stability had been restored. Wizards pursued their studies, clerics served their gods, sorcerers explored their innate powers, and warlocks maintained their pacts. Magic seemed as reliable and permanent as the sun rising each morning. But this stability would not last. In the year 1385 Dale Reckoning, events unfolded that would lead to the most catastrophic magical disaster since Karsus's folly. Mistra was murdered by Cyric, the god of murder and lies, who had been driven to madness by reading a cursed book. But unlike previous occasions when the goddess of magic had died, this time the transition of power did not occur smoothly. The weave, suddenly without its divine maintainer, began to unravel. What followed is remembered as the Spell Plague, and it represents the single most catastrophic magical disaster in recorded history. The weave collapsed completely, and for a brief, terrifying moment, all magic ceased to function across multiple worlds simultaneously. Then, as reality attempted to compensate for the sudden absence of the structure that had organized magical forces for millennia, chaos erupted on a scale that defied comprehension. Blue fire, raw magical energy freed from the weave's restraints, erupted across Faerun. This plague fire consumed anything it touched, transforming matter into more magical energy that fed the growing conflagration. Entire cities were destroyed in moments, their populations either killed instantly or transformed into twisted mockeries of their former selves. Magical items exploded or went haywire, their enchantments no longer constrained by the rules that had governed them. Spellcasters trying to cast spells found their magic spiraling out of control, often with fatal results. The spell plague did not simply kill and destroy. It fundamentally altered reality in ways that persisted long after the initial catastrophe had passed. Geography changed, with entire regions being transported to other planes of existence or merged with locations from distant worlds. The continent of Faerun was reshaped, its familiar landmarks destroyed or altered beyond recognition. Some areas became infused with permanent magical effects, regions where the laws of nature simply no longer applied in consistent ways. Spellcasters suffered particularly terrible fates during the spell plague. Those who were actively casting spells when the weave collapsed were often consumed by the magic they had been channeling. Others were transformed into spell-scarred individuals, mortals marked by exposure to raw magical energy. The spell-scarred gained strange new abilities, but also suffered unpredictable side effects. You might be able to see magic directly, but be unable to stop seeing it. Your vision permanently overlaid with blazing colors, representing magical auras. The collapse of the weave also affected divine spellcasters, though in different ways than it impacted arcane magic users. Gods still existed and could still grant power to their followers, but the pathways through which divine energy had flowed were damaged or destroyed. Clerics and paladins found themselves cut off from their deities or receiving only intermittent divine support. Some gods chose new methods for granting power to their followers, establishing direct connections that bypassed the need for the weave entirely. In the aftermath of the spell plague, a new structure began to emerge from the chaos. This was not the weave as it had existed before, but something different, something that incorporated lessons learned from the catastrophic failure. Based on what we know of divine power and magic's fundamental nature, we can assume this new framework formed either through Mystra's restoration or through reality's own tendency to organize chaotic forces into stable patterns, regardless of its origins. This new framework for magic functioned differently from the original weave in subtle but important ways. The recovery from the spell plague took decades. Slowly, painfully, societies rebuilt what had been destroyed. Spellcasters relearned magic, discovering that some spells no longer worked as they once had, while other new effects became possible. The spell-scarred found ways to live with their altered nature, some even learning to control and direct their strange new abilities. Dead magic zones and wild magic zones persisted, but they stabilized, their boundaries no longer expanding unpredictably. But the spell plague had revealed something troubling about magic's fundamental nature. The structure that allowed safe spellcasting was not permanent or unbreakable. It could fail, could be destroyed, leaving mortals either helpless or vulnerable to the raw chaos of unstructured magical energy. This realization changed how many spellcasters approached their craft. Some became more conservative, avoiding experimental magic that might damage the repaired weave. Others became more aggressive in pursuing magical knowledge, reasoning that if catastrophe could strike at any moment, they should achieve as much as possible while stability lasted. Magic across different worlds and campaign settings demonstrates remarkable variation in how fundamental forces of reality manifest. In the world of Kryn, magic draws not from a single weave, but from 3 separate moons, each aligned with different moral principles. Spells draw their power from one of these lunar sources, and the relative positions and phases of the moons affect how magic functions. This suggests that the weave as Faerun knows it represents one solution among many for organizing magical forces. On the plane of Eberron, magic operates through dragon marks, mystical symbols that manifest on certain bloodlines and grant access to specific types of magical effects. These marks represent an entirely different magical tradition from Faerun's weave-based spellcasting. Someone bearing a dragon mark can produce magical effects related to their mark without traditional study or divine favor. The marks are hereditary, passing through family lines, creating dynasties of magic users whose power comes from blood rather than learning or faith. Eberron also features a completely different understanding of divine magic. The gods, if they exist at all, do not directly intervene in mortal affairs. Clerics and paladins gain their power not from actual deities, but from their faith itself, their belief generating real magical effects without requiring a god to grant that power. This represents a radical departure from Faerun's model, where divine spellcasting depends on actual gods choosing to empower their followers. These different magical systems across various worlds suggest that magic itself is more flexible and varied than residents of any single world might realize. The weave, as Mistra created it, represents one solution to organizing magical forces. But it is not the only possible solution. Other worlds have developed different approaches, different structures, different relationships between spellcasters and the cosmic forces they manipulate. The question of whether magic will remain stable into the future concerns scholars and powerful spellcasters alike. History has demonstrated repeatedly that magical catastrophes can and do occur. The fall of Netheril, the time of troubles, the spell plague, each of these disasters reshaped how magic functioned and how mortals understood their relationship with cosmic forces. Based on the patterns we observe in magical history, there is no reason to believe such catastrophes will not occur again, particularly given that the causes often involve divine conflicts or mortal ambition that shows no sign of diminishing. You, as someone who touches magic regularly, carry responsibility for its future. Every spell you cast affects the weave in small ways, adding to or subtracting from its overall stability. Reckless magic, pushing boundaries without understanding consequences, risks damaging the structure that makes safe spellcasting possible. Responsible magic, practiced with awareness and respect for the forces involved, helps maintain the framework upon which all spellcasters depend. The study of magic's origins leads inevitably to contemplation of its purpose and meaning. Why does magic exist at all? What role does it serve in the cosmic order? These questions have occupied philosophers and theologians for millennia without producing definitive answers. Magic might be a fundamental property of reality, something that has always existed and always will exist regardless of what mortals or gods do. Or it might be an artifact of creation, something that emerged when gods imposed order on primordial chaos, and now serves as a tool for maintaining that order. Perhaps magic exists as a gift to mortals, a way for limited beings to transcend their natural limitations and achieve effects that would otherwise require divine intervention. Or perhaps it represents a test, a dangerous power given to mortals to see what they will do with it, whether they will use it wisely or destroy themselves through misapplication of forces they do not fully understand. Each of these interpretations carries different implications for how you should approach spellcasting and your relationship with magical power. What remains certain is that magic has become inseparable from mortal civilization across Faerun and countless other worlds. Societies depend on magical healing, magical communication, magical defense against threats, both mundane and supernatural. Removing magic from these cultures would be like removing a fundamental element, leaving them unable to function in ways they have grown accustomed to. This dependency creates vulnerability, because anything that disrupts magic becomes an existential threat to society itself. The future of magic remains unwritten, shaped by choices being made in the present by spellcasters across multiple worlds and planes of existence. You participate in writing that future through your relationship with magic, through how you learn it and teach it, through how you use it, and what purposes you apply it toward. The accumulated weight of these choices, multiplied across millions of spellcasters and thousands of years, will determine whether magic remains a stable force for positive change or becomes a source of renewed catastrophe. As you drift toward sleep tonight, let your mind settle on the vast web of magical energy that surrounds and suffuses all of reality. The weave exists beyond your perception in this moment of rest, but it remains present, continuing to channel magical forces even as you sleep. Tomorrow you may cast spells, drawing upon this cosmic structure for your own purposes. But tonight, simply rest in the knowledge that magic exists, that reality is more flexible and responsive than mundane perception suggests. That possibility remains open to those with knowledge and will to reshape what is into what might be. The origins of magic stretch back to before time had meaning, before space had structure, before the concepts of beginning and ending existed. Yet magic continues to evolve, to change, to develop in response to how mortals and gods understand and utilize it. You are part of that ongoing evolution, a participant in the grand story of how conscious will interacts with cosmic force to create effects that transcend natural law. Sleep well, knowing that mysteries remain to be uncovered, that deeper understanding awaits those who pursue it with dedication and care. The magical lore you have absorbed tonight represents only a fraction of the knowledge that exists about reality's fundamental forces. As you continue your journey as a spellcaster, or as someone who seeks to understand magic from outside its practice, you will encounter new insights, new questions, new wonders that expand your comprehension of what magic is and what it might become. If you have found value in this exploration of magic's deepest mysteries, consider subscribing to this channel for more journeys into the hidden lore of Dungeons and Dragons. Leave a like if this deep dive into magical origins has enriched your understanding or inspired your imagination. Share your thoughts in the comments about which aspects of magical theory intrigue you most, which questions about magic you would like to see explored in future videos. Your engagement helps this channel continue creating content that delves into the rich, complex lore that makes Dungeons and Dragons such an endlessly fascinating world to explore. May your spells never fail. May your connection to magical forces remain strong. And may your understanding of the weave deepen with each passing day. Rest now and dream of the infinite possibilities that magic makes real.